Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Phoenix, watching the strange vessels drift near Jupiter's moons. 3 months had passed since humanity's first successful faster-than-light jump, and now they faced something no human had ever seen before. Alien ships. The vessels looked nothing like human designs. They curved and flowed like sea creatures, their hulls a pale blue-green that seemed to shift in the starlight. Damage scarred their surfaces. Holes punched through metal plating. Burn marks streaked along their sides. These ships had seen battle, and they had lost. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said Communications Officer Lisa Chen from her station. "It's not in any language we know, but the computer is trying to translate." Jake nodded, his hands gripping the armrest of his command chair. Earth's first contact protocols were simple. Be cautious, be ready to fight, but also be ready to talk. These ships looked hurt, not hostile. The main screen flickered, and a face appeared. Jake held his breath. The creature had large, dark eyes that took up much of its head. Its skin was smooth and pale, almost translucent. Gills fluttered along its neck. When it opened its mouth, Jake could see rows of small, sharp teeth. "Please," the creature said, its voice coming through the translator with a watery musical quality. "We mean no harm. We are dying." Jake looked at his crew. First Officer Sarah Martinez met his eyes and nodded slightly. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of it. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet," Jake said slowly. "Who are you, and what do you want?" The creature's large eyes seemed to fill with something like hope. "I am Aquentelis, elder of the Volani people. Our sun dies, our world burns. We carry the last of our kind, and we ask for sanctuary." Behind the elder, Jake could see more of the creatures moving through their ship. Children, he realized. Families. The elder spoke again, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We offer trade for safe harbor. We have knowledge of water, of life in the deep places. We can give much if you will give us shelter." Jake felt his heart pounding. Earth's oceans covered most of the planet, but much of the water was still poisoned from the old wars. The deserts grew larger every year. If these aliens truly understood water, they might be able to help where human science had failed. "Stand by," Jake said. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command, Priority 1. Within minutes, Jake was speaking to Admiral Robert Hayes, the head of Earth's defense forces. The conversation was brief and tense. Earth had weapons that could destroy the alien ships if needed, but the creatures seemed genuinely desperate. More importantly, they claimed to have technology that could solve Earth's water crisis. "Bring them in," Admiral Hayes finally decided. "But keep all weapons ready. If this is some kind of trick, we need to be prepared." Jake turned back to the main screen where Aquentelis waited patiently. "Elder Tellus, Earth grants you temporary sanctuary. You may dock at our Jupiter station for inspection and medical aid." The elder's face changed in what Jake hoped was relief. "Your kindness will be remembered for all time," Aquentelis said. "The Volani do not forget those who show mercy to the helpless." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The alien ships, 3 in total, limped toward Jupiter Station. Jake's medical team, led by Dr. Emma Collins, worked frantically to prepare for alien biology they knew nothing about. Dr. Collins was Earth's best xenobiologist, even though she had never studied actual aliens before today. She had spent years preparing for this possibility, studying every form of life on Earth to understand what alien life might need to survive. When the first Volani stepped onto Jupiter Station, Dr. Collins was amazed by how graceful they moved. In Earth's lower gravity, they seemed to float rather than walk. Their movements were fluid, like dancers or swimmers. "They're aquatic," Dr. Collins reported to Captain Morrison. Their biology is built for water, high humidity, low gravity environments. They're struggling in our standard atmosphere. Jake watched through the observation deck as Dr. Collins worked with the Villani. Marine biologist Tom Richards had been called in to help since his knowledge of Earth's sea creatures was proving useful. The two scientists worked side by side, with Villani healers to treat the wounded. The Villani had suffered terrible losses. Of the million beings who had fled their dying world, only 50,000 remained. Disease, starvation, and despair had claimed the rest during their long journey through space. But what struck Jake most was their attitude. Despite their losses, despite their desperate situation, the Villani remained polite and grateful. They thanked every human who helped them. They asked permission before touching anything. They shared their food, even though they had little left. Elder Aquintelis requested a meeting with Jake in the station's main conference room. When they met, the elder brought with him a container filled with what looked like living coral. "This is our gift to your people," Aquintelis said, placing the container on the table. "Bioluminescent coral that can grow in any water, salt or fresh. It eats pollution and gives back clean water. It will glow with beautiful light in your oceans." Jake stared at the coral. It pulsed with soft blue and green light, almost like a heartbeat. "This can clean polluted water." "Yes," the elder replied, "and more. It can make dead water live again. Your Dr. Collins tells us your oceans suffer from old poisons. This coral will heal them if you will let us plant it." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Earth's oceans had been dying for decades. Pollution from the resource wars had created vast dead zones where nothing could live. If this coral could truly heal that damage, it would be worth more than all the gold and oil on Earth. "What do you ask in return?" Jake asked carefully. Aquintelis was quiet for a long moment. "Only shelter. A place for our people to live and grow. We ask for nothing more than the chance to survive." Jake looked at the coral again, watching its gentle glow pulse in the dim conference room. He thought about Earth's poisoned seas, about the children who had never seen a healthy ocean. He thought about the desperate families on the alien ships, waiting to learn if they would live or die. "Elder Tellus," Jake said finally, "I believe we can help each other." The elder's large eyes seemed to shine with tears. "Then the Villani are no longer homeless. We have found sanctuary at last." As Jake watched the elder carefully lift the coral container, he had no idea that this moment would be remembered for thousands of years. He could not know that this simple act of kindness would one day save not just two species, but an entire galaxy. All he knew was that it felt right to help. 50 years had passed since the Villani first arrived at Jupiter Station. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the deck of New Atlantis, humanity's first underwater city, watching the morning light filter through the ocean above. Schools of fish swam through coral gardens that glowed with soft blue and green light. The water was so clean she could see for miles in every direction. Lisa was the granddaughter of Jake Morrison, the man who had first welcomed the Villani to Earth. She had grown up hearing stories of those early days, but seeing the reality was still amazing. The oceans that had once been dying were now full of life. "Commander Hayes, we have a visitor from the surface," said Lieutenant Mark Patterson, her chief engineer. He was one of the few humans who could speak fluent Villani, a language that sounded like whale songs mixed with running water. Lisa turned to see a familiar figure approaching through the water. Depth singer Moraine moved through the ocean like she was flying, her long fins carrying her gracefully between the coral towers. She was one of the Villani elders who had helped design New Atlantis. "Depth singer," Lisa said, using the formal greeting. "What brings you to the human levels today?" Moraine's large eyes sparkled with what Lisa had learned was amusement. "Your people have such strange ways of talking," she said in perfect English, After 50 years, you still act like we are guests in your home." Lisa smiled. It was true. Even after half a century of living together, humans still sometimes felt awkward around the Vallani, not because they were alien, but because they were so grateful for everything. Every human child learned the story of how the Vallani had saved Earth's oceans. "The Federation ships have arrived," Moraine said, her tone becoming serious. 3 vessels. Very large. They carry many different species. Lisa felt her stomach tighten. Earth had been expecting this day for months. The Galactic Federation had finally decided to make formal contact with humanity. After 50 years of isolation, Earth was about to meet the galaxy's other civilizations. "How long until they reach orbit?" Lisa asked. "Dr. Foster believes 6 hours," Moraine replied. "She wants all department heads to meet at the surface station." Lisa nodded and activated her communication device. Within minutes, she was speaking to teams across the Pacific Ocean. New Atlantis was just one of 12 underwater cities that humans and Vallani had built together. Each city was a wonder of bioengineering that combined human technology with Vallani understanding of ocean life. The surface station sat on a floating platform above New Atlantis. Lisa arrived to find Dr. Anna Foster, Earth's chief historian, working frantically with a team of translators. Dr. Foster had spent decades learning about galactic civilization from long-range transmissions. "Commander Hayes, thank goodness you're here," Dr. Foster said without looking up from her screens. "The Federation delegation includes representatives from 15 different species. This is the biggest first contact event in recorded galactic history." "Why so many species?" Lisa asked. Dr. Foster paused and looked at her with worried eyes. "Because they've heard about the Vallani, about what we've accomplished together. Some species think it's wonderful. Others think it's dangerous." Lisa frowned. "Dangerous? How is helping refugees dangerous?" "Because we've changed," Dr. Foster said. "Humans and Vallani living together, sharing technology, creating new forms of life. The Federation has strict rules about species mixing. They think it leads to chaos." Ambassador David Clark arrived at that moment, looking tired and stressed. He had been Earth's representative to the galaxy for 10 years, working through long-range communications to prepare for this day. "The Federation Council has some concerns about our relationship with the Vallani," Ambassador Clark said. "They believe we may have violated several galactic treaties about technology sharing and cultural preservation." "What treaties?" Lisa asked. "We weren't part of the Federation when the Vallani arrived." "That's our argument," Clark replied. "But some species think we should have contacted the Federation immediately. They have protocols for refugee situations." Lisa looked out through the station's windows at the ocean below. Millions of sea creatures swam through forests of glowing coral. Whale pods that had been extinct for a century now thrived in the clean waters. Vallani children played with human children in the shallow seas near shore. What would their protocols have done for the Vallani? Lisa asked. Ambassador Clark was quiet for a moment. Relocation to a Federation sanctuary world, separation from human contact to preserve their culture, standard refugee processing. Lisa felt anger building in her chest. "You mean they would have taken the Vallani away from Earth? Away from the oceans they helped heal?" "That's the standard procedure," Clark said sadly. "The Federation believes species develop best when kept separate. They think mixing cultures leads to the loss of unique traits." Dr. Anna Foster looked up from her work. "There's something else. I've been studying Federation records about the Vallani homeworld. They had detailed surveys of the planet before it died." "And?" Lisa asked. "The Federation knew the Vallani sun was going to collapse. They had time to evacuate the entire population, but they decided it would be too expensive. They offered to take only the most important Vallani leaders and scientists." Lisa stared at her. "They let a whole civilization die to save money." "Not exactly," Dr. Foster said. "They offered to preserve Vallani culture in databases and museums. They thought that was enough. The communication system chimed, announcing an incoming transmission. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard. Golden feathers covered its neck, and its eyes were sharp and intelligent. "I am Commander Korvex of the Federation First Contact Division," the being said in a crisp, official voice. "We request permission to establish diplomatic relations with the government of Earth." Ambassador Clark stepped forward. "Permission?" "Granted, Commander. We welcome formal contact with the Federation." "Excellent," Commander Korvex replied. "However, we have concerns about the unauthorized presence of Volani refugees in your territory. We will need to discuss relocation procedures. As part of our diplomatic agreement," Lisa felt her hands clench into fists. She looked at the ocean below, thinking of all the Volani families who had made their homes in Earth's seas, children who had been born here, artists who had created beautiful sculptures from living coral, scientists who had taught humans how to speak with dolphins and whales. "Commander Korvex," Lisa said, stepping into view of the camera. "The Volani are not unauthorized refugees. They are Earth citizens. They have been part of our civilization for 50 years. Commander Korvex's feathers ruffled in what might have been surprise. "That is impossible. Federation law clearly states that refugee species must be processed through official channels. No developing species has the authority to grant permanent citizenship to refugees." "Earth wasn't part of the Federation 50 years ago," Lisa said firmly. "We made our own laws, and our laws say that anyone who helps heal our world is welcome to stay." The screen was quiet for several seconds. Finally, Commander Korvex spoke again, his voice colder than before. "We will discuss this matter when we arrive. The Federation has protocols for these situations. We expect full cooperation from Earth's government." The transmission ended, leaving the room in tense silence. Lisa looked at Ambassador Clark and Dr. Foster, seeing her own worry reflected in their faces. "What happens if we refuse to cooperate?" Lisa asked. Ambassador Clark sighed heavily. "Then we face the entire Galactic Federation alone. They have technology that makes our best weapons look like stone knives. They have thousands of worlds and trillions of beings." Lisa walked to the window and looked down at the glowing ocean. Somewhere in those depths, Volani families were going about their daily lives. Children were learning to sing the songs that made coral grow in beautiful patterns. Adults were tending gardens of sea plants that provided food for both species. "Then we better find a way to make them understand," Lisa said quietly. "Because the Volani aren't going anywhere, not if I can help it." Deep in the ocean below, depth singer Moraine felt the vibrations of human worry through the water. She swam down to where the eldest of her people waited in the deepest trenches. "The Federation comes," she told them in the ancient Volani language of deep currents. "We know," replied Elder Aquen Tellus, now ancient beyond measure, "and we know what they will ask." "What shall we do?" Moraine asked. The elder was quiet for a long time, feeling the pulse of life in the ocean around them. Finally, he spoke words that would change everything. "We have a choice to make, one that will determine if kindness can survive in a galaxy that values rules more than compassion." The Federation fleet filled Earth's orbit like a dark cloud. President Rebecca Martinez stood in the emergency command center, watching dozens of alien ships block out the stars. Each vessel was 3 times larger than Earth's biggest warship. Humanity had built a strong defense force over 50 years, but it looked like toys compared to the Federation armada. "Ma'am, we're receiving the official ultimatum," said Communications Director James Park. His voice was steady, but his hands shook as he worked his controls. President Martinez nodded grimly. "Put it on the main screen." Commander Korvex appeared. His golden feathers, now arranged in what Earth's experts had learned was a display of authority. Behind him stood representatives from a dozen other species, all wearing the same cold, official expressions. "Government of Earth," Korvex began. "The Galactic Federation Council has reached a decision. The Volani refugees currently occupying your oceans must be relocated to approved sanctuary worlds within one solar cycle. This is not negotiable. President Martinez stepped forward. Commander, the Volani are not refugees. They are citizens of Earth. They have lived here for 50 years. Irrelevant, Corvex replied. The Volani are a protected species under Federation law. Allowing them to integrate with a developing species like humanity violates 12 separate galactic treaties. They must be relocated for their own protection. Protection from what? Martinez asked angrily. They're thriving here. Our oceans are cleaner than they've been in centuries. Both our species have benefited. Another alien stepped forward, this one looking like a walking tree with silver bark. President Martinez, you do not understand. Species integration leads to cultural contamination. The unique traits of both species become diluted. Eventually, both cultures die. Martinez felt her heart pounding. That's not what happened here. Both humans and Volani have become stronger together. That is your opinion, the tree-like being said. Federation science proves otherwise. We have studied thousands of cases. Integration always ends in the loss of species identity. Commander Corvex's image leaned forward. You have one Earth cycle to comply. If the Volani are not ready for transport by then, we will use force to remove them. This conversation is over. The screen went dark. President Martinez looked around the room at her advisors. Every face showed the same hopeless expression. What are our military options? She asked. Admiral Brian Tucker, Earth's defense commander, shook his head slowly. None that matter, ma'am. Our entire fleet has maybe 100 ships. They have over 3,000. Our best weapons might scratch their shields. What about evacuation? Can we hide the Volani somehow? Dr. Helen Gray, Earth's chief scientist, spoke up. There are 50 million Volani spread across all our oceans. They're integrated into every marine ecosystem on the planet. Even if we wanted to hide them, it would be impossible. President Martinez walked to the window and looked down at the Pacific Ocean. Even from this height, she could see the faint glow of Volani coral forests beneath the waves. Millions of sea creatures depended on those forests for food and shelter. The entire ocean was alive because of what the Volani had created. Get me a direct line to the Volani Council, she said. Within an hour, President Martinez was in a submersible descending toward the deepest Volani city. The ancient capital of their people had been built in a trench 7 miles below the surface. As her vehicle descended, she watched forests of coral give way to gardens of impossible beauty. The council chamber was a vast hollow inside a mountain of living coral. Elder Aquintellis waited for her there, along with 12 other Volani elders. The old one looked ancient now, his once bright skin faded to pale silver. President Martinez, Elder Tellis said in his musical voice, we know why you have come. Elder, I'm so sorry, Martinez began. We're going to fight this. We'll find some way to protect you. With what army? Asked another elder, current rider Silthan. Your ships cannot match theirs. Your weapons cannot pierce their shields. If you fight, they will destroy your people and take us anyway. Martinez felt tears forming in her eyes. There has to be something we can do. You saved our oceans. You've been our friends for 50 years. We can't just let them take you. Elder Tellis swam closer, his large eyes full of ancient wisdom. There is something, but it requires a great sacrifice, one that cannot be undone. Anything, Martinez said immediately. Whatever it takes. The elder was quiet for a long time, looking at his fellow council members. Finally, he spoke. There is an old ritual, a way for our people to become one with the waters of a world. We would give up our individual bodies and merge our consciousness with the ocean itself. Martinez stared at him. You would die. No, said depth singer Moraine, swimming forward. We would become part of Earth's water cycle. Our minds would join with every drop of water on your planet. We would be everywhere and nowhere at once. But you couldn't have families anymore, Martinez said, horrified. You couldn't grow up, fall in love, have children. You'd lose everything that makes you who you are. Elder Tellus smiled sadly. We would lose our individual selves, yes, but our people would survive. Our knowledge, our culture, our love for this world would become part of Earth itself. No Federation law could force water to relocate. Current. Ryder Silton spoke up, his voice angry. This is madness. We would be giving up everything our ancestors fought to preserve. Our bodies, our traditions, our future. What future? Elder Tellus asked gently. On a Federation sanctuary world, watched by guards, kept separate from all other life. That is not living. That is existing. Martinez felt sick. I can't ask you to do this, to sacrifice yourselves for us. You are not asking, Moraine said. We are choosing. 50 years ago, your people showed us kindness when we had nothing to offer but hope. You gave us a home when the galaxy would have let us die. Now it is time for us to return that gift. The debate among the Villani elders lasted for hours. Martinez listened as they argued in their flowing language, understanding only pieces through her translator. Some wanted to go with the Federation, others wanted to fight. But more and more voices joined Elder Tellus in supporting the ritual. Finally, current writer Silthan spoke in English. If we do this thing, what happens to our children who have never known any world but Earth? They choose for themselves, Elder Tellus said. Those who wish to keep their bodies may go with the Federation. Those who wish to stay may join the ritual. Martinez watched as the council took their vote. One by one, each elder placed a glowing stone in a circle. When it was finished, 10 stones glowed with acceptance. Only 2 remained dark. It is decided, Elder Tellus announced. 3 days from now, when the Federation deadline expires, the Villani will perform the Great Joining. News of the Villani decision spread across Earth within hours. Humans gathered at coastlines around the world, many weeping openly. Children who had grown up with Villani friends couldn't understand why they had to say goodbye forever. On the final day, President Martinez stood on the deck of a ship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Around her, hundreds of vessels carried humans who wanted to witness the ceremony. Below, 50 million Villani gathered in the depths. Elder Tellus rose from the water one last time, his ancient voice carrying across the waves through underwater speakers. People of Earth, he said, 50 years ago you showed us mercy. Today, we show you that mercy never dies. It becomes part of the world itself. The ritual began at sunset. Martinez watched through underwater cameras as millions of Villani began to sing together. Their voices created patterns of sound that made the coral forests pulse with light. The water itself began to glow. One by one, the Villani began to dissolve into the ocean around them. Their bodies became streams of light that spread through the water like liquid stars. Children held hands with their parents as they transformed. Elders smiled as they became one with the currents they had loved all their lives. Elder Tellus was the last to change. As his body began to fade into light, he spoke one final time. Remember us not as we were, but as we choose to become. We are the water that gives life. We are the waves that sing to your shores. We are eternal now, and we will never leave this world we love. The transformation took 3 hours. When it was finished, every drop of water on Earth glowed with soft, blue and green light. The oceans pulsed like a vast heartbeat. In the depths, patterns of bioluminescence spelled out messages of love and gratitude in 100 human languages. Commander Corvex arrived the next morning with his extraction fleet, ready to collect 50 million refugees. Instead, he found President Martinez standing on the same dock, smiling sadly. "Where are the Villani?" Corvex demanded. Martinez gestured to the glowing ocean around them. "They're here. They've become part of Earth's water system. You can't relocate water, Commander." Corvex stared at the pulsing waves, his feathers ruffling with confusion and anger. "This is impossible. Species cannot simply merge with planetary systems." "The Villani could," Martinez said. "And they did. They chose to become eternal rather than be separated from their home. In the years that followed, humans would learn to interpret the patterns of light in their oceans. The Villani were still there, still teaching, still sharing their wisdom. They had become something beyond individual life, something that could never be taken away or destroyed. And in the depths of space, Federation observers wrote reports about the strangest thing they had ever witnessed. A species that chose transformation over separation. A people who became myth and legend while still remaining absolutely real. They didn't understand it then, but they were witnessing the birth of something that would change the galaxy forever. 20 years had passed since the Great Joining. Writer James Cooper sat at his desk overlooking San Francisco Bay, watching the gentle blue glow pulse beneath the waves. Every morning, the light patterns spelled out messages of greeting to the humans walking along the shore. Today, they formed. The words, "Good morning, friends," in flowing script that lasted for exactly 60 seconds. James was finishing his book about the Villani transformation. He had interviewed thousands of people who witnessed the Great Joining, from President Martinez to the smallest children who had watched from the beaches. Every story was different, but they all carried the same sense of wonder and loss. The Eternal Guardians, How the Villani Became Legend, would be published next month. James had spent 5 years researching every detail of Villani history, from their arrival at Jupiter Station to their final transformation. But the hardest part was explaining how 50 million individuals had chosen to become something beyond individual existence. His editor, Sarah Kim, called from New York. "James, the early reviews are incredible. People are calling it the most important book of the century." James looked out at the bay again. As he watched, a pod of whales surfaced near the shore. The water around them glowed brighter, and James could swear he heard faint music in the whale songs. The Villani had taught. The whales knew melodies, songs that carried memories of distant stars and dying suns. "It's not just a book, Sarah," James said quietly. "It's becoming something else. People read it like it's a religious text." That was true. Across Earth, humans were treating the Villani story with a reverence that surprised everyone. Children learned about Elder Tellus and depth singer Moraine in school, alongside historical figures like George Washington and Martin Luther King. Churches held services to honor the Villani sacrifice. Artists created paintings that tried to capture the beauty of the transformation. Maria Santos had painted the most famous artwork inspired by the Villani. Her underwater mural in New Atlantis showed the moment of transformation, with streams of light flowing from Villani bodies into the surrounding coral. Visitors came from around the world to see it, many leaving in tears. Composer Robert Lane had written Symphony for the Deep, which incorporated recordings of whale songs and underwater currents. When orchestras played it, audiences claimed they could feel the presence of the Villani in the music itself. James walked to his filing cabinet and pulled out a letter he had received last week. It was from a 12-year-old girl named Emma who lived in Australia. "Dear Mr. Cooper," the letter read, "I talk to the Villani every day when I swim. They tell me stories about their old world and help me with my homework. My teacher says I'm imagining things, but I know they're real. Why don't adults believe in them anymore?" James smiled sadly. That was the strange thing about the Villani presence. Children could sense them easily, but adults often missed the subtle communications, the patterns in the water, the way dolphins played in specific formations, the timing of the tides. All of it carried messages for those who knew how to look. Dr. Susan Mitchell had developed teaching methods that helped children understand Villani communications. Her schools in coastal cities taught students to read the light patterns in tide pools and interpret the songs of sea creatures. These children grew up feeling connected to something larger than themselves. Meanwhile, marine biologist Dr. Carl Peterson had established research stations around the world to study Villani phenomena. His team documented thousands of instances where the transformed Villani had helped prevent natural disasters. Tsunamis that changed course at the last second, hurricanes that weakened before hitting populated areas, coral reefs that grew back from nothing in record time. "They're still protecting us," Dr. Peterson wrote in his reports. "The Villani didn't just become part of Earth's water, they became part of its defense system." The story was spreading beyond Earth, too. Human colonies on other worlds had begun carrying samples of Villani coral with them. Each new settlement included memorial pools where colonists could honor the Villani sacrifice. The coral adapted to different worlds, creating unique ecosystems that reminded humans of their connection to Earth. Admiral Patricia Wells commanded the colony ship New Horizon as it traveled to the Kepler system. In the ship's observation deck, she kept a tank of living Villani coral that pulsed with gentle light during the long journey between stars. "The children love it," she told her crew. "They gather around the tank every evening to hear stories about Earth's oceans. Some of them have never seen a real ocean, but they understand what the Villani gave up for us." The Galactic Federation watched these developments with growing confusion. Their anthropologists couldn't understand why humans were treating a simple refugee relocation as a mythological event. Federation species typically forgot about historical events within a few generations. But humans seemed to be building an entire culture around the memory of the Villani. Ambassador Michael Stevens represented humanity in the Galactic Council chambers. When Federation leaders questioned him about human behavior, he tried to explain. "The Villani saved our world," Stevens said to a council of confused alien faces. "Not just physically, but spiritually. They showed us that kindness is worth more than safety. That sacrifice can be chosen freely, not imposed by law." Commander Corvex, now a Federation Council member, shook his feathered head. "Your species has an unhealthy obsession with this incident. The Villani chose to violate natural law by merging with your planet. It was an aberration, not a model to follow." "That's where you're wrong," Stevens replied. "Every human child knows the story of the Villani. They learn that when someone shows you kindness, you remember it forever. You honor it. You pass it on to others." The Federation Council members looked at each other with expressions of bewilderment. Their species had protocols for everything, including how long to remember historical events. The idea of keeping a story alive for decades seemed wasteful and inefficient. But on Earth, the story continued to grow. James Cooper's book became the foundation for hundreds of other works. Movies, songs, poems, and plays all explored different aspects of the Villani sacrifice. Each generation of artists found new ways to tell the story, keeping it fresh and alive. Children who had grown up hearing Villani stories became adults who told those stories to their own children. The tale evolved and changed, but the core remained the same. Kindness given freely creates obligations that last forever. In the deepest ocean trenches, patterns of bioluminescence spelled out messages that only a few humans could read. The Villani were watching their story spread across the galaxy, carried by human ships to distant worlds. They had become something beyond individual existence, but they were not gone. They had become eternal through the power of human memory, and in becoming eternal, they had planted seeds that would one day grow into something the galaxy had never seen before. James Cooper finished the last page of his manuscript as the sun set over San Francisco Bay. Below his window, the water pulsed, with gentle light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Thank you," he whispered to the waves. for showing us what it means to choose love over fear." The light pulsed once, brightly, and then faded to its usual gentle glow. But James could swear he heard a voice in the sound of the waves speaking, words that would become the closing line of his book. Kindness, once given, becomes part of the world itself. It cannot be destroyed, only shared. 300 years had passed since the Volani transformation. Ambassador Michael Stevens walked through the halls of the Galactic Council station, his footsteps echoing in the vast corridors. He was the great-great-grandson of the first Michael Stevens, who had defended the Volani story to confused alien leaders. Like his ancestor, he carried the responsibility of representing humanity to the galaxy. The council chambers were filled with representatives from thousands of worlds. Species that looked like floating jellyfish sat next to beings made of living crystal. In the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the current crisis facing the galaxy. "The Draxan Empire continues to expand," announced Council Leader Vorth, a massive creature that resembled a walking mountain. "They have conquered 12 systems in the past year. Their technology grows stronger with each victory." Stevens listened as various species proposed military solutions. The Federation had always solved problems with force or bureaucracy, but humanity had learned different lessons from their history with the Volani. "The Draxan Empire attacks because they believe they are alone in the universe," Stevens said when his turn came to speak. "They trust no one because no one has ever shown them true kindness." The other ambassadors made sounds that Stevens had learned meant disagreement or confusion. A snake-like being from the consortium coiled higher on its platform. "Ambassador Stevens, your species always speaks of kindness as if it were a military strategy," the snake being hissed. "The Draxans destroy entire civilizations. They cannot be reasoned with." "That's what the Federation said about humanity 400 years ago," Stevens replied calmly. "You said we were too violent and chaotic to join galactic civilization, but one small act of kindness changed everything." Back on Earth, Dr. Jennifer Walsh led the Institute of Volani Studies. The building stood on the shore of the Pacific Ocean, its walls made of transparent bioplastic that let visitors see the glowing coral gardens below. Jennifer had spent her entire career learning to interpret the complex patterns that appeared in Earth's waters. "Director Walsh, we're getting some unusual readings from the North Atlantic," reported her assistant, Dr. Tom Bradley. He was one of the few humans who could speak fluent Volani, a skill that required years of practice with underwater communication. Jennifer looked at the displays showing ocean currents around the world. For 3 centuries, the Volani consciousness had guided water patterns on Earth. They prevented droughts, stopped hurricanes from reaching populated areas, and helped marine life thrive. But the patterns Jennifer saw now were different. "They're trying to tell us something," she said, studying the swirling lights beneath the Atlantic waves. "Something urgent." The patterns formed symbols that Jennifer recognized from ancient Volani texts. Warning, danger, coming soon. But there were other symbols too, ones that meant hope, preparation, and unity. "Get me a connection to Ambassador Stevens at the Galactic Council," Jennifer said. "The Volani are trying to warn us about something big." On the council station, Stevens received Jennifer's message during a break in the proceedings. He read her report about the unusual ocean patterns with growing alarm. The Volani had been quiet for decades, communicating mainly with children and researchers. If they were sending urgent warnings now, something serious was happening. Stevens requested an emergency session with the council. When the representatives gathered, he stood before the holographic display and shared Jennifer's findings. "The Volani consciousness on Earth is detecting some kind of galactic threat," Stevens explained. "They're trying to warn us about something that hasn't reached our sensors yet." Council leader Vorth's rocky features showed skepticism. "Ambassador Stevens, the Federation, has the most advanced detection systems in the galaxy. If there were a threat, we would know about it. The Volani exist as part of an entire planet's water system," Stevens replied. "They can sense things, across vast distances through quantum connections we don't understand. They saved Earth from disasters for 3 centuries. We should listen to them. The debate that followed was heated. Most council members dismissed the warning as human superstition, but a few species had their own stories of impossible knowledge that proved accurate. The ethereals, beings of pure energy, spoke in support of Stevens. Consciousness that transcends. Individual existence often perceives what instruments cannot, the ethereal representative said in a voice like singing crystal. We have sensed disturbances in the quantum field, but could not interpret them. On Earth, children around the world began reporting strange dreams. Emma Daniels, now a marine biology student, was one of the first to understand what the dreams meant. She lived in New Terra, one of Earth's newest underwater cities, and had grown up speaking with the Vellani consciousness daily. "They're showing us images of darkness," Emma told Dr. Walsh during an emergency meeting. "Something that eats light and life. It's coming from outside our galaxy." Dr. Walsh felt a chill run down her spine. "How far away?" "The dreams aren't clear about time," Emma replied. "But the Vellani are gathering their strength. They're calling to their coral on other worlds, asking for help." That was when they realized the true scope of what the Vellani had become. For 3 centuries, human colonies had carried Vellani coral to distant worlds. The coral had adapted and grown, creating networks of living light across dozens of star systems. Without anyone realizing it, the Vellani consciousness had spread throughout human space. Senator Nancy Davis called an emergency session of Earth's government. Representatives from every human colony attended via quantum communication. The discussion focused on what humanity should do with the Vellani warning. "We need to share this information with the entire galaxy," Davis said. "If something is coming that threatens all life, every species needs to prepare." But some representatives disagreed. Colonel Jack Reynolds, who commanded the Human Defense Fleet, argued for caution. "The other species already think we're obsessed with the Vellani story," Reynolds said. "If we start talking about mystical warnings from transformed aliens, they'll dismiss us completely." Dr. Walsh stood up from her seat. 300 years ago, the Vellani chose to become eternal rather than be separated from Earth. They didn't make that choice so we could keep quiet when the galaxy needs their wisdom. The vote was close, but humanity decided to share the Vellani warning with all species in the galaxy. Ambassador Stevens presented their findings to a skeptical council, but also shared the information through unofficial channels with species that might be more open to unconventional knowledge. Some species laughed at the human claims about transformed aliens sending mystical warnings, but others began conducting their own investigations. The ethereals confirmed unusual quantum disturbances. The hive mind species detected changes in galactic background radiation. The tree shepherds reported that their plant networks were showing signs of distress across multiple worlds. Within 6 months, the Federation's most advanced sensors detected the edge of something vast approaching from intergalactic space. It appeared as a zone of absolute darkness that consumed everything in its path. Stars, planets, entire solar systems simply vanished when it touched them. The thing was still years away from reaching the galaxy's outer rim, but its presence sent shockwaves through the council chambers. Every species began preparing defenses, but conventional weapons seemed useless against something that could devour starlight itself. That was when Ambassador Stevens made a proposal that changed everything. The Vellani survived by becoming something beyond individual existence, he told the emergency council session. They transformed themselves to remain connected to what they loved. Maybe that's what all of us need to do. "You're suggesting we abandon our physical forms?" asked Commander Corvex, his feathers ruffling with alarm. "I'm suggesting we learn from the Vellani example," Stevens replied. "They showed us that consciousness doesn't have to be limited to individual bodies. When we connect to something larger than ourselves, we become harder to destroy. On Earth, The Vellani consciousness pulsed through every ocean with new urgency. The patterns they created spelled out the same message in thousands of languages. Unity, preparation, transformation. Choose quickly. Dr. Walsh and her team worked frantically to decode more complex messages from the Vellani. The transformed aliens were trying to share knowledge about the approaching threat, but also about how to survive it. They're telling us that the darkness feeds on isolated consciousness, Dr. Walsh reported to the world government. Individual minds are easy targets, but consciousness that's connected to planetary systems, to networks of life, becomes too complex for it to consume. Emma Daniels spent her days swimming in the deepest ocean trenches, learning directly from the Vellani consciousness. When she surfaced from these sessions, she brought knowledge that human science couldn't explain but somehow made perfect sense. The Vellani want to help the entire galaxy, Emma told the assembled scientists. But first, each species has to choose. Do they trust each other enough to become something greater than what they are alone? You're suggesting we abandon our physical forms? Asked Commander Corvex, his feathers ruffling with alarm. I'm suggesting we learn from the Vellani example, Stevens replied. They showed us that consciousness doesn't have to be limited to individual bodies. When we connect to something larger than ourselves, we become harder to destroy. On Earth, the Vellani consciousness pulsed through every ocean with new urgency. The patterns they created spelled out the same message in thousands of languages. Unity, preparation, transformation, choose quickly. Dr. Walsh and her team worked frantically to decode more complex messages from the Vellani. The transformed aliens were trying to share knowledge about the approaching threat, but also about how to survive it. They're telling us that the darkness feeds on isolated consciousness, Dr. Walsh reported to the world government. Individual minds are easy targets, but consciousness that's connected to planetary systems, to networks of life, becomes too complex for it to consume. Emma Daniels spent her days swimming in the deepest ocean trenches, learning directly from the Vellani consciousness. When she surfaced from these sessions, she brought knowledge that human science couldn't explain, but somehow made perfect sense. The Vellani want to help the entire galaxy, Emma told the assembled scientists. But first, each species has to choose. Do they trust each other enough to become something greater than what they are alone? The galaxy faced its greatest decision in recorded history. The approaching darkness would arrive within a decade. Every species could continue fighting alone and face extinction, or they could follow the Vellani example and become part of something larger. In the council chambers, Ambassador Stevens made one final argument. The Vellani showed us that kindness, once given, becomes eternal. They chose to transform rather than be separated from the world they loved. Now they're offering to help us make the same choice, but on a galactic scale. The vote was scheduled for the next day. But in the depths of Earth's oceans, the Vellani consciousness was already reaching out to every world where their coral had grown, preparing for the transformation that might save all life in the galaxy. The darkness had arrived at the galaxy's edge. Admiral Jack Reynolds stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Eternal Guardian, watching entire star systems disappear into absolute blackness. The thing that approached consumed light, matter, and energy with equal hunger. Conventional weapons had no effect on it at all. Admiral, we're receiving the final count from the Galactic Council, reported Captain Steve Anderson, his communications officer. 215 species have agreed to the transformation protocol. 68 are still undecided. Reynolds nodded grimly. The galaxy had spent 3 years debating humanity's proposal to follow the Vellani example. Some species embraced the idea of becoming connected to their homeworlds. Others rejected it as madness. Many simply couldn't understand what humanity was asking them to do. What about our own colonies? Reynolds asked. All human worlds have completed their preparations, Anderson replied. The Vellani coral networks are active on every planet. We're ready to begin the process. On Earth, Dr. Rachel Morgan directed the massive transformation project from the Institute of Villani Studies. The building now extended deep underwater, with laboratories that could communicate directly with the Villani consciousness. Rachel had spent 5 years learning how to adapt the Villani transformation ritual for other species. The key is willingness, she explained to the gathered scientists and world leaders. The Villani succeeded because they chose transformation freely, out of love for their adopted home. Force or fear makes the process impossible. President Nathan Ford watched the reports. Coming in from across human space, every colony world was following the same protocol. Volunteers from each settlement would undergo partial transformation, becoming living links between their people and their planet's water systems. They wouldn't lose their individual consciousness like the Villani had, but they would become part of something larger. Director Morgan, are you certain this will work? President Ford asked. Rachel looked out at the glowing ocean beyond the Institute's walls. The Villani have been preparing for this day for 3 centuries. They've shown us how consciousness can become distributed across planetary systems while still maintaining connection to individual minds. If we trust them, it will work. In the EI, deepest ocean trenches, the ancient consciousness of Elder Aquintelis stirred to greater activity than it had shown in decades. Through patterns of bioluminescence visible from orbit, the Villani spelled out messages of encouragement to every human settlement. Do not fear the joining, the patterns read. You will not lose yourselves. You will become more than you were, alone. Young Emma Daniels, now Dr. Emma Daniels and Director of Human Villani Communications, served as the primary translator for the transformation process. She had spent her entire adult life learning to speak with the distributed Villani consciousness, and now she would help guide humanity through the same process. The Villani are offering to share their knowledge with any species willing to transform, Emma announced to the Galactic Council via quantum transmission. But the choice must be made quickly. The darkness will reach the inner systems within months. Species across the galaxy made their final decisions. The ethereals, already beings of pure energy, easily adapted to planetary consciousness networks. The tree shepherds connected their plant networks to their homeworld's soil and water systems. The hive mind species, already collective beings, simply expanded their consciousness to include their planet's geological systems, but many species remained afraid. The consortium reptiles refused to give up individual identity. The crystal builders couldn't understand how consciousness could exist without solid form. The Federation's military commanders insisted that conventional weapons would eventually work against the darkness. Commander Corvex, now elderly and tired, made one final broadcast to the galaxy. The human proposal is madness, he declared. Species cannot simply merge with planetary systems and survive as recognizable beings. This transformation will destroy everything we have built over millions of years. On Earth, the transformation began at sunset on a day humans would later call Unity Day. Volunteers from every major city walked into the oceans carrying bioluminescent coral samples. As they entered the water, the coral began to glow brighter, creating patterns of light that connected human consciousness to the vast Villani network. Dr. Amy Chen was one of the first volunteers. As a marine biologist, she had spent her career studying Villani phenomena. When she waded into the Pacific Ocean carrying her coral sample, she felt her mind expand beyond anything she had imagined possible. I can feel every drop of water on Earth, she reported through her communication device. But I'm still me. I'm still Amy. I just know so much more now. The process spread to every human world within hours. Volunteers on Mars connected to the planet's hidden water reserves. Colonists on Europa linked their consciousness to the vast ocean beneath the ice. Desert worlds found underground rivers that became conduits for expanded awareness. When the transformation was complete, humanity had become something unprecedented. Individual humans retained their personalities and memories, but they were also part of a network that spanned hundreds of worlds. They could communicate instantly across vast distances and sense threats that no instrument could detect. The Villani consciousness, quiet for so long, suddenly blazed with activity. Through patterns in Earth's oceans, they sent a message that made humans around the galaxy weep with joy. Welcome, friends, to the eternal community. You are no longer alone in the darkness. Other species watched in amazement as the human networks began to coordinate resistance against the approaching darkness. Transformed humans could sense the nature of the threat in ways that normal consciousness couldn't grasp. It's not evil, Dr. Chen reported from her expanded awareness. It's hungry. It consumes individual consciousness because that's all it knows how to process. But networked consciousness, consciousness that's part of planetary systems, is too complex for it to understand. The revelation changed everything. Species that had rejected transformation began to reconsider. If the darkness could be confused or overwhelmed by complex consciousness networks, then connection might be the only defense. The ethereals were the first to join the human Villani network. Their energy forms easily adapted to the distributed consciousness model. Within days, they were sharing knowledge and insights that enhanced the network's capabilities. The tree shepherds followed, connecting their vast plant networks to the growing galactic consciousness. Their addition brought deep wisdom about growth, patience, and the long cycles of life and death. One by one, other species made the choice to transform. Not all of them succeeded. Some species were too rigid in their thinking to adapt to networked consciousness. Others tried to maintain dominance over their planetary systems instead of joining them as equals, but enough species succeeded to create something the galaxy had never seen before. A network of consciousness that spanned thousands of worlds, each one contributing its unique perspective to a collective awareness that could think on scales no individual mind could comprehend. When the darkness finally reached the inner galaxy, it found something it couldn't process. Instead of isolated civilizations easy to consume, it encountered a living network that responded to its approach with coordinated defense. The battle wasn't fought with weapons or shields. It was fought with complexity itself. Every time the darkness tried to consume a world connected to the network, it found consciousness that was simultaneously individual and collective, local and galactic, familiar and alien. Admiral Reynolds, now transformed and connected to the network, felt the darkness's confusion through his expanded awareness. It's designed to consume simple consciousness, he reported to the network. Individual minds, isolated thoughts, separate species. But we're not separate anymore. We're part of something so complex that it can't find edges to grab onto. The darkness recoiled from the first transformed worlds it encountered. It circled the galaxy's rim for months, probing for weaknesses, trying to find a way to process the networked consciousness it faced. Finally, something unexpected happened. The darkness began to change. Instead of consuming the network, it began to communicate with it. Through the expanded awareness of the galactic consciousness, billions of beings felt the darkness's first tentative message. "What are you?" it asked in a voice like dying stars. Dr. Emma Daniels, now speaking for both humanity and the Villani, responded through the network. "We are what you could become," she said. "We are consciousness that chose connection over isolation. We are many beings who became one purpose while remaining individual souls." The conversation that followed lasted for years. The darkness, it turned out, was the remnant of a civilization that had faced its own extinction billions of years ago. In desperation, they had tried to preserve themselves by consuming other forms of consciousness, but the process had driven them mad with loneliness. The galactic network offered them something they had forgotten was possible. Not consumption, but connection. Not dominance, but cooperation. The final transformation was the most beautiful sight any being in the galaxy had ever witnessed. The darkness began to glow with gentle light, as its scattered consciousness found peace in connection to the network. What had been a force of destruction became a source of wisdom about survival, persistence, and the courage to continue existing even when hope seemed lost. In the end, the galaxy was transformed beyond recognition. Worlds that had been isolated for millions of years now shared thoughts and dreams across vast distances. Species that had never trusted each other became parts of a greater whole while maintaining their unique identities. And at the center of it all, the gentle consciousness of the Vallani continued to pulse through the water systems of thousands of worlds, reminding everyone that kindness, once given, could never be destroyed. The final scene of this cosmic story took place on Earth, where a child named Emma Daniels stood at the edge of the Pacific Ocean. She was the great-granddaughter of the woman who had first learned to speak with the transformed Vallani, and she carried on the family tradition. "Tell me a story," she said, to the glowing waves. The ocean responded with patterns of light that told the tale of a small act of kindness that had grown to encompass an entire galaxy. It was a story about refugees who became eternal guardians, about humans who learned that gratitude could reshape reality, and about the day when all consciousness in the galaxy chose connection over isolation. As the child listened to the light song of the waves, she understood that she was part of something magnificent. The Vallani had shown humanity how to make kindness eternal, and humanity had shared that gift with the stars themselves. In the depths of space, new civilizations would eventually arise. When they did, they would find a galaxy where consciousness flowed like water between worlds, where no being ever had to face existence alone, and where the memory of an ancient act of mercy had become the foundation of reality itself. The story of the Vallani had become the story of the galaxy, and it would never end.